as an author and a writer, sometimes you think, oh, this is just a validation exercise, but it can be so much more than that.
Because if you go on websites like Goodreads and Storygraph, it's not always obvious what is an indie book.
Does it make you feel like you don't want to review things?
In general, my practice is that what I was finding is a lot of my bad interactions were leading me to not interact at all.
What would your advice be to authors who wish to engage? Hello and welcome to today's About. Today I have the wonderful Kriti from Armed with a Book, and today is about Kriti from Armed with a Book. So welcome, Kriti.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. You are our first guest of our new recording season, or of the year, if you will. And it has, for those of you who don't know, Kriti has an amazing website called Armed with a Book. How long's the blog been going now?
I started it in May 2019. So it's coming up on, 5 years now? I don't know. Terrible at doing math on the fly.
Yeah, so back in 2019. What inspired you to start?
I had been blogging probably since I was a teen. I remember the days when blogs first started coming out because the internet was new and all of that. And I used to have a personal blog that I would write on over the summer. There was one summer when I read a lot and wrote about all the books that I read. And as I got busy with schooling and grad studies and things like that, I continued to write here and there, but I didn't really have a particular purpose for the longest time.
Right.
Then I got into a teaching degree, and I did have a purpose for about 2 years to write about teaching techniques and education. But once that wrapped up and I wasn't going into education, I still wanted to continue writing. And I was already reading by then. So I was like, okay, maybe I should do a book blog where I'm writing about books. I continue to read and then I continue to write. And that's how Armed with the Book came to be.
You mentioned how blogging was very big in once everyone got broadband. Because there was time, everyone.
Yeah.
And dial up. So once we got broadband, we had stable connections. The blogging scene was very big. And I used to be a blogger in a past life. And when I was blogging, it was very much about fashion. I remember the fashion bloggers. I can't remember her name. Cannot remember her name. I don't know if you were into fashion blogging, but blogger was.
I feel like my blogging hasn't changed that much. I'm more about writing. I'm terrible about interacting. I try to here and there, but it's So though I did not really explore fashion blogs, I was mostly looking at just my own stuff was more lifestyle related. But seriously, what lifestyle does a 16-year-old have? I was writing a little bit about my day. That's it.
Yeah. And with blogging, did you find, I think the question I've got is not what drew you to it, because you said you wanted to keep the writing going after you had your degree and everything, but what kept you in it? Because it can be tough trying to manage that and your life.
Yeah, I think just realizing that it's something I enjoy helps me continue to keep coming back to it.
Yeah.
I also have a journaling practice, so even if I'm not posting anything on on social media or on my website, I'm still continuing to write for myself.
Yeah. So I have to ask, being a publisher and everything, is a book in the works?
There is a book in the works.
No book in the works. Is it something you're tempted by?
When I was younger, I did end up writing a few that I had all my college friends read, but that's about it. That's all I did.
Okay. So now we've moved on to books. I am so interested to know your thoughts on the publishing industry. So for those of you who don't know, Kriti is based in Canada. Today's About and myself are in London, UK. And I have a whole bunch of opinions, but my opinions are very much about the big traditional publishers who are worldwide, but a lot of them are based in UK. So I'm really interested to A, hear your opinions, and also B, hear your perspective from the Canadian publishing world?
Where do I start? First of all, like as a blogger, I didn't really realize. Just as a reader, I didn't know how big of an industry it was until I actually started blogging, because now suddenly I was more active on social media. I was seeing more authors, I was seeing publishers. I follow a lot of publisher accounts and authors, and I get requests from like all over the place. And it's been quite an interesting experience to learn about the different structures in place, like in a publishing in like big publishers or even with small publishers. There's a variety of people that interact with a book. As someone who just reads, you might not really think about it until you actually think about it. There's editors, there's artists, there's so many kinds of editors on top of that. There's beta readers, alpha readers, like this. I did not know like how many people play a role in the publishing of a book until I actually started interacting with them. And then again, coming to the different kinds of routes that we have in publishing, you could go traditional publishing, you could go self-publishing, you go indie presses, like, and I'm not even 100% on definitions a lot of times, because what seems like would be maybe a traditional press doesn't always end up being that. Like, you really need to look into them to know where do they stand, and like if that matters.
Yeah.
A lot of times for me, honestly all the time, I'm just looking for good books. And when we were doing our Instagram live, we talked about it very briefly with how just the amount of effort and manpower almost that big publishers in particular, are able to put in to bring awareness about their new books, up and coming books and authors. It's a minefield, and especially with social media and how small our attention spans are.
Yeah. It is true. I mean, like, poetry is kind of my sector. And I have found that poetry right now, I personally feel, is being kept alive by the indies and social media. There are a lot of self-published poets who are selling great numbers, but the traditional routes, like, they're not going to be on a bestsellers list because they haven't gone through Nielsen's publishing or whatever, and they're not getting orders through the bookshops, which is crazy to me because it's not really very fair. You know, at the end of the day, they are selling those numbers and they should be recognized for it. They've done the marketing, they've pushed themselves, they've done an amazing book. It's popular and it's poetry, which apparently no one reads, but clearly people do. So, yeah, I know what you mean about it being a minefield. Like, my experience with it was very, I jumped into a sea basically. I didn't realize. I thought I was going into a pool.
Yeah, and also related to that, just most recently, I've been exploring a lot more awards. Like, one of the awards I am still following, is the Scotiabank Gila Prize Award. It's a Canadian award. It's an annual award that they have some criteria around it. I was just reading their finalists. And what was really interesting about that was, I, in general, would not have picked up these finalists. I wouldn't really have known about these books. But as I read them and I enjoyed them, I'm tempted to look at more awards, because that's a way of finding books which I might not come across, especially if it's not a genre I regularly read.
Yeah, no, that is very true. And I think in terms of being a writer, awards are a really good way to get recognition, to also encounter your peers, see who else is writing, what other stories are out there. So yeah, I think your point about awards is so true, and it's very important point, because I think as an author and a writer, sometimes you think, oh, this is just a validation exercise, but it can be so much more than that. Obviously, it depends on the award. Also, they get sponsored by won't know. Scotiabank is a big.
They're also doing their own publicity, right? Like, these accounts for these awards are often pretty active on social media and are continuously talking about the authors who are on their long list, on their short list, and with them being annual awards, it's just easier to continue to engage with them and see what else they have found.
Yeah, very, very true. In terms of the Canadian publishing world, tell me that.
I feel like it's still very much influenced by the US. There are Canadian authors that we definitely try to, we see more of them now. There are movements like Canada Reads, and like the Giller Prize that I talked about, which does bring awareness to a lot more Canadian works. So it's going well. I definitely feel a difference like 5 years ago and where I'm at now, where maybe personally I see it more, so I engage with it more, and I'm just really interacting with it a lot more than I used to. Um, I think our publishers are still kind of mostly based out of the US. Like a lot of the books are, it's, I don't know how to say it. Maybe it's like a distribution thing where it's more like even though we have it's like Canadian versions of like HarperCollins and Penguin. Like it's like there's an India version there too, you know. Like in all of them, I haven't really looked into it as much, but I'm curious about which stories end up in all those countries rather than just being limited to the West or to the UK, because that probably all clubs in together a lot better audience wise.
Yeah.
But it is still good to see a lot more multicultural stories coming up, and just authors from different cultures being on book lists and seeing them available for review opportunities and interview opportunities has been really good.
Yeah, no, I think it is good. I feel like publishing is in a place, it's in a intermediary phase. Like it's going through like this renaissance. Like there's this traditional publishing, there's the way to do things.
Yeah.
And like the internet and like self-publishing and all the different houses that are kind of open, all the indies that are around now and doing really very well. It's opening up the market. But talking of indies, because one thing that authors are always told to do is get reviews. And you were involved in Indie Story Geek.
Yes.
So please tell me more about Indie Story Geek.
All right. So Indie Story Geek is the brainchild of one of my friends. She's an author, and she's an indie author. She self-publishes her book. I think she has a press just under which she publishes them. And she had this idea of having a website which was geared for indie authors, where you could find indie books. Because if you go on websites like Goodreads and Storygraph, it's not always obvious what is an indie book. So what she did is she set up this website where it's really easy for anyone to add an indie book. So it's not limited to the author going and adding it. Like if I have read an indie book, I think that's how you actually ended up on it, because on my website, I talk about Indie Story Geek, and I encourage all my authors, anyone who's interacting with me, like, please go add your book there. Because I know people who use that website. My friend SK herself, she reviews a lot of the books on there. That's her main reviewing platform. And I quite enjoy seeing the books on there, and I'm often there like every month looking at what new stuff got added. It also has the option where if indie authors want, they can upload a review copy, which is accessible to verified reviewers on the website. It's growing, and I'm really happy for it. One of the things that SK and I did for it was we don't have a rating, like a star system. Instead, what we use is something that I developed with some of my reader friends. It's like an 8 criteria system where we rate the book on how it did for world building, cast, plot, immersion, emotional response, thought-provoking aspects. I always cover, and I'm probably missing one. But then there's like a visual representation of how that reading experience was for people. And it's not really a rating, it's more of a scale around, all right, with storytelling, for example, was this a descriptive book? Was it like a really balanced kind of perspective? It gave you exactly just the right amount of details that you needed to create the story in your mind, or was it just really minimalistic and you had to really work hard to imagine what was going on? So it's not a rating, but it's just a different way of looking at books.
But I really appreciated that, because I do find with like some of the other review websites, it depends how the reviewer feels. And I think it does help when you kind of focus someone's attention to ask them. It's almost like asking specifically, what did you like about this book? Was it the storytelling? Was it this? Was it that? And I think that's actually really good. Highly
I've started to see that a lot more with reviews now. I think a lot more people are using criterias like that. I was actually reading a couple of reviews on Goodreads this morning, and yeah, people are talking about cast and world building. And I think personally for myself, if I can't sit and write a review for a book, like it's been a while or I don't know where to start, I'll use my criteria to get started. Because okay, what do I want to say about world building? That really focuses me, and then I can talk about it versus just a blank page of what do I want to say about this book.
Yeah. I'm curious about your opinion, because there have been some incidences where someone's reviewed a book and the author has been like, well, got involved basically. I mean, I have my personal stance on that, but I mean, it doesn't happen often, but it has happened a few times, which I've been surprised about. Do you have any comments or any thoughts on that situation? Does it make you feel like you don't want to review things?
Um, I think I'll need like a more fleshed out scenario for that. In general, my practice is that I do want to interact with the authors and I want to get to know them. And I love doing interviews and I love hosting people. So I often will reach out to authors, and sometimes I hear back and sometimes I don't. And that's okay. With reviews, especially when we do blog tours through organizers, the good etiquette practice is that if you did not like the book, if you rated it less than 3 out of 5, don't tag the author. Like, don't show this to the author, which it makes sense. You're trying, I guess you want to have good opinions out there and show them those good opinions. And it's fact of life. Not everyone likes everything that they read or they come across, and we kind of have to just work around it.
Yeah.
I do find though that sometimes like we don't really know how the story came to be and what the full intention around it was, and sometimes you get to know that when you talk to the author, and sometimes you don't.
But do you think that's important? Do you think a piece of work should stand on its own rather than being contextualized like that?
I think it depends on what that piece of work was trying to do.
Yeah. I like that. It's a very sage response. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about Armed with a Book, because you have a very, I loved your process. So basically, for those who don't know, I met Kriti when I reached out to her, basically saying, please review my book. And Kriti was very kind, and she offered me the opportunity to do like a guest spot on the blog, and you sent me some questions over and we did this interview back and forth, and it was great. But you have a whole process and you make it very clear on how to engage with you, which I thought was amazing. So if you're an author, indie, self-published, book influencers are quite important. You want to get feedback on the work as well. And it can be a bit of a minefield. So how did you come to the point where you felt, the need to put that up? And because it felt like things had happened that came.
Yeah. It's you know what, it's how you described it about jumping into publishing and poetry, that it's a sea, and it's very much the same. It was very much the same for me. When I started, I was really active on Twitter. I had lots of people that I was chatting with, and things would happen. There were instances where there were clashes between authors and reviewers, and it's so funny because it's like we are little communities on the internet and things are happening and we're all riled up. Like,
yeah, you meet your friends about it and they're like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't actually even remember anymore how my form was originally. But when I first started, I was open. I've always been open to hearing about people and their books. And I think it was actually probably Twitter that annoyed me the most, where people would tag me and be like, hey, read this book, read my book, which is based on these 2 other books. And what do I do about that? Yeah. And like, I don't even know these 2 other books. Like, a lot of times people assume that you know the comparative works that they're going for, but that's not necessary. Not everyone reads everything that's popular or knows everything that is popular. We don't have that much time.
But it's also about your interest. Like maybe you're not even interested in that.
Yeah, like I do personally sometimes avoid very popular books because I see them all the time on my feed and I'm like, all right, enough people have read this. I'll go read something else. And if I really want to, I'll come back to it at some point. It's not a big deal. But yeah, there were instances like that. And then I would often get like the whole book attached in my email. And I got very annoyed because it was like, I don't want I don't want your book. Unless I say I want your book, I don't really want your book. And like telling that to authors is hard because now you're almost being confrontational, even though it is very much through an email that, hey, like, please don't send this to me. There'll be times when I got the same message that was being sent out to so many other people, and then like my name wasn't spelled right, or my name wasn't my name at all. And then it's like, did you not put any effort into this? Like, I'm definitely not going to bother, but like it takes time. And it was so many of these repeated instances of like, where's our common sense? Is this just because we're not meeting anyone in person? Why are we okay with just bombarding people with requests? Yeah, spamming them. And so that ended up evolving into me working with some of my book blogger friends and some of my indie friends. And we wrote this article about book blogger and author relationships, that please don't do this and please do this. And like, it's true across, I've visited many book blogs, and it's very hard to find one that doesn't have a book review policy. They will tell you, we have all had to do this, where we've set rules, we've set boundaries that, hey, I read these kind of books, I don't read these kind of books. If you've made it through this, now you may email me or you can fill out this form. And it took me a few iterations to come up with my form because I had to think about, I had to find a way to convey that I might not get to that book. That yes, I'm interested and I would love to read it, but I want to read 800 other books. Maybe it's 450 at this point on Goodreads, but you know what I mean. And like, I actually track how many books I add to my TBR every month, and it can easily be 30 books. And I don't read that many in a month. So there's always going to be a really bigger pile and a tiny pile.
Well, it's
always a competition.
It's so interesting that you mentioned a to be read pile, because it can get stressful.
Oh yeah. Oh, you have your to be read file, and I feel like I have like an immediate, hopefully reading soon file, which is part of it. They're kind of on top over there. But then you add in deadlines. Like, as reviewers, we're often working with publishers and authors, trying to read advanced copies, or at least hoping to read advanced copies, or trying to put out some content around the publishing date. Like, we do want to help bring, more readers to their books because we're interested in their books. We like this book. Hey, maybe check this out. That can also get stressful. And what I was finding is a lot of my bad interactions were leading me to not interact at all. And then I just didn't want to do it. And there are instances of burnout through pursuing anything, especially when you have like a uncontrollable element of how people will interact with you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing I found so interesting about you is I feel like you are a true Rubik's Cube, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Which is, I believe everyone's a Rubik's Cube to some extent. But it's basically like, I always give the example, like you're an accountant, but you make fire art on the side, or you're like, you love to go into the studio and you make amazing music, but no one's heard it because you're just like, no, I'm an accountant. So Rubik's Cubes are people who have all of these different elements and aspects to their existence. And you definitely are a Rubik's Cube because you've got the blog, you've got your art, you've got your day job, and you've got a life. You've got a lot going on. And one of the things I was like, I need to be this way, was your organization. You were so organized with the blog. So when you decided to like start posting on your art account, did you apply the same kind of method you did for what you developed for the blog with your art, or is it a different kind of way of doing things?
You know what? It's just been fairly recent. So the scheduling with the blog, it's been years in the making.
Yeah.
I've gone through, when I first started, I used to have a proper calendar and I had dates for myself, like this date I'm posting this and this date I'm posting this. But most of the time I would set that up like a week or 2 week in advance. I didn't know very much far ahead how much I was going to do. And then I kind of stopped doing that and let it just be.
Yeah.
I was posting every day for a few months. So I think that kind of burnt me out. Because I was like, okay, I don't, that was insane, but it was 2020.
You're like, I had some time.
Yeah. And then after, I took a little bit of break last year because of my wedding, and then coming back to it with fresh eyes was really energizing because I had a moment to think about, all right, how do I really want to do this? Because I want to continue doing this, but I don't want it to be something I stress about. So I focused a lot on writing my book reviews that I had not written for months. Just didn't have the time, and just making sure that the point of stress for me is, I need to post something. I want to post something, but I haven't written it.
Yeah.
So I tried to build a distance between when I was going to do it and when I was actually writing out what I wanted to share. With my art account, it also sort of started with, I just sporadically want to do art.
Yeah.
But it's hard to sporadically just do anything. Like, I don't want to go pick up my paintbrushes at all sometimes. And this week, actually, I saw this art challenge, and that got me motivated to just do a little bit of art every day. And then I can post about it or not post about it. It's fine. I maintain a calendar for my book blog. I have a similar calendar for Instagram now, for my book Instagram. And then I added I use the same one for my art account. It's just, doesn't matter if it's 2 accounts. It's good though. Like, it's nice to see, nice to kind of work towards something, because with the art stuff, it's more spontaneous. But once I've done it, then I add to my calendar that, okay, I posted something.
Yeah. And in terms of having a day job and pursuing creative interests, was that something you were able to do from the off? Because you said you were at uni at one point. Were you working before you went to uni? Did you have because you did a PhD, didn't you?
No, I did masters. I have 2 masters.
Same thing. I did one too. And I'm like, it was a PhD. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. But because you would have had you had your first degree, then you had a break, and then you went on to your masters?
No, I did everything back to back. I did work time for the last 2 degrees, and it was fun. But you know what? Like, it's only when you start working full time, at least for me, that was what I experienced. It was, now I really had control on what I wanted to do with my time. Because when you're in school, there's deadlines, there's exams to study for, there's materials to read, there's assignments to do. But now I had to create my own deadlines to have, or not even deadlines, just goals to work towards. And it was really easy to fall into the pattern of reading more or writing a lot. And or building a website. Like, I feel like I go through phases every couple months where I look at one of my web pages and be like, I don't like this anymore. I want to change this.
Yeah. Yeah. But did you find it was a balancing act, or did you find it something? Because you were saying, like, when you moved into full-time work, you felt like you had more control over your time. So,
yeah, it was like my evenings were free.
Yeah.
I think I was already kind of gearing up for it, because it was years of spending time reading and writing. So it was an obvious decision that my free time was going to go into reading and writing. I just didn't know what that was going to look like. So the organization piece of it was a little bit surprising. There have been times when I've looked at, like, my old bullet journals and just see all the stuff that I was doing related to my education. And then to see those similar patterns in reading and writing and in the blog, that they kind of got transferred over. Like, all those skills are still being used.
You're like, thanks, uni. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but now we're talking. I kind of have to touch on it. So, I actually went to uni in Canada. I went.
I went. What? I've missed you for a few years. When were you here?
it was a long time ago, Kriti,
Okay.
very old. 2004 to 2007, I was in Montreal. I went to Concordia. Yes, for those of you out there, Concordia is the other English speaking university in Montreal, not McGill. But I went to Concordia and I had a fantastic time. But in terms of like education systems, how would you rate the Canadian system?
Like, are we talking university or school?
University. I don't have no idea what happens at school. I've never went to school in Canada.
It's so my first degree, I grew up in India. I moved to Canada in 2014. So when I think about comparing like Canada and like education and university, the one I'm comparing with is always going to be India.
Yeah.
That's where it came from. And there's a lot more freedom here with which subjects you choose and how you organize your time. In India, they give you their timetable. Here you go. You're here 8:30 to 4:30. These are your classes. Might have a little bit of break, but there aren't really options the same way. Um, I do think though that the kind of drive that comes with that sort of a strict education system, um, I think it teaches you to just come back to something and continue to chip away at it. Versus here, where I just had a lot more free time. Like I personally had to think about, okay, what am I doing here? Yeah, okay, I'm studying this or I'm doing that, which is okay. It's good to still learn those skills, but I want to say that a lot of I'm totally losing on the word. Just the discipline of it
Yes.
is something that was a lot harder here because it was just a lot. And well, sometimes I wouldn't even have the same people in the same course. I would take 4 courses and I would have one person in a course that I could sit with. No one would have the same classes. So there's a lot to it. And I think as an international student, it gets even harder when you're in a new country and you don't really have friends and you're adjusting with a whole other level of education and just trying to figure out what you're doing.
Yeah, I must admit, when you said the freedom, I just remembered so vividly that book you get at the beginning of the year, and you have all of the classes you can take, right? And it's like separated by degree programs, and you're just looking, you're like, so I did political science, so I was like, politics in America. The semester, and it's like, this will give you 3 points to your degree. I loved that. But
I love the options too. Yeah, when my last degree was a teaching degree and we had to take like some English credit courses, and I was like, whoa, I have options to look at any English course. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to take that.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's so much freedom. But like, if I compare it to the UK system, because most of my friends went to like English universities. First, everyone in my first year went, "You studying?" I was like, yeah, because of the grade point average, right? Because in the first year in the UK, it's relevant if you want it to be relevant. So it's a choice, and apparently a lot of people decide it's not necessary. Whereas I'm like midterms and all of these exams, I was like, "What are you doing?" No, it's really serious. I can't fail anything ever. Got to keep the GPA up. But yeah, what you said about the discipline and the structure, I do remember very vividly actually being on the escalators at Concordia being like, I have so much time. I like don't, because from like A levels, it was a similar thing. You had your classes, you had all of this, you had so much to do that when I got to uni, I was like, so
Now what?
yeah, it was like, there's this reading list, which, to be fair, I didn't pick up until well into the semester because I didn't realize it was there.
It's overwhelming. There's so many courses and everyone has a different style of teaching. And I think that's one of the things that India has in terms of consistency, that every course is, of course, the material is going to change, but the teaching style is very much going to be the same. The expectation is going to be the same. You had better show up for class. You better get good marks. Like all of that is still the same. But here, it's like even if you get a chance to interact with your professor, the chances of having like a long-term relationship with them and going back to them and learning from them continuously, taking a second course with them, is sometimes not possible.
Well, I was a bit lucky. So me and one of my friends, one of the friends I made at uni, we were like, we love this professor. We basically stalked the professor throughout our 3 years there. We're like,
Perfect.
yeah, but it's not always possible because sometimes they're like, this is the professor, and then they change it at the last minute.
Yeah.
And, yeah, yeah, but yeah. I was just interested because I'm always interested to hear about people's educational experiences, especially when they've had like international experiences. Um, I think it's quite important that if you are going to uni, you look at your options outside of where you're based and what your opportunities are. Maybe you decide to stay home. That's completely valid. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's always good to keep an eye on it because when you think about it worldwide in terms of costs, there are cheap options which are actually better for you sometimes, depending on what you want to study. So I just think it's important to always speak to people about their experiences when it comes to things like that.
Well, and then the experiences that you gain out of it's so valuable compared to not moving anywhere. And moving is hard. Like there's nothing easy about any of it. But it's just how much you grow and how much like I interacted with so many people from around the world in my first
Yeah.
year, and it was amazing.
Yeah, like it's funny because I would be like, wow, there are so many people from all over the world here. People are like, oh, you're from London. I'm like, it's not the same. And it's so true because like in London, it's a particular kind of international. Like it's like from England, like east, basically. Like we get all of that side of the world and some of the African countries and some of the South, and we get the like Eastern Asian, South Asian, and that side. But I hadn't met South Americans like the way I met South Americans, you know? I hadn't met the Caribbeans the way I'd met those. Like, there were so many things about the Caribbean that I didn't know. And then there was also the African contingents. The kids, there was a group on Facebook from my uni, which was when people don't know the name of your country. And it was like the kids from like Burkina Faso or Suriname and all of this. And I just found that so funny because it's like, it's so true. There are so many countries out there. And you think, because you met someone from South Africa or India, you've met everyone from around the world. You have no idea.
No, we're all just very different with different cultural roots, different societal expectations. There's just so much to know about the world, and it's not possible to know all of it, but just interacting with different people, it's fascinating.
So in terms of like the stories you like to read, have you found that you're getting more variety? Like, have you seen a change in like the kind of stories that have now been available? Like I remember seeing a TikTok about where are the Polynesian young what's it, YA books? And where are the like fantasy books from that part of the world? I was like, yeah, I read something from Fiji. And I was like, I'm not even sure if Fiji's considered Polynesia. Anyway, but do you know what I mean? Do you feel like you're getting more now, especially with social media and the internet and the fact that people had that downtime during the pandemic to kind of like actually explore their interests?
I think there's definitely been a lot more variety of stories that I've started to see, and it's hard to say. Maybe it's because I'm more open to looking for them that I find them, or they're just out there more in general.
Yeah.
That would be a whole other analysis and point that I hope someone is doing. But I found myself really gravitating towards historical fiction for a little bit, but even within historical fiction, while a lot of it used to be focused around the world wars, we are talking about other places now, like stories around with the Vietnam War and the Korean War. Like those have started. At least I see them a lot more, which I really like that. There are parts of history that I wasn't taught. I recently read a book which was about Tibet, and it's really close to India, but I didn't really know a lot about it. So it's really nice to see like the worldview expand through that as well, that we're not just focusing on like what happened in France or Germany, or we're actually expanding to other parts of the world and bringing stories from there and talking about those people's cultures. I've seen a lot more of that. There's definitely been more female protagonists, even in historical fiction a lot more. So, and I found, like we were talking about lessons in chemistry during the Instagram live, which isn't it's historical fiction, but it's not about the world wars. It's just about a female scientist, which is really nice to read about too. Mary Benedict's books are often about women in historical fiction and these sort of roles. It's really good to see different stories come up more and more.
Yeah. I was just thinking in terms of like, what was I thinking? In terms of the stories that are coming out, in terms of the world we're now living in, because there's definitely been a shift. I want to say post-pandemic, but we're not technically out of the pandemic. I don't think the World Health Organization is like, it's over. We're done. We're good. Everyone go back to normal. Carry on. But it does feel like we're getting more back to a sense of like what our new normal will be. Do you think the stories that you're expecting to see in the next few years, are you expecting a change, or are you expecting more of a continuation in what we're seeing, or are you expecting us to go backwards, like go back to what we were doing before?
I don't know. We're gonna see. I'm here for the ride.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So I'm very conscious of time. Do you so we've got about 10 minutes. So I'm just thinking, like, do you have something that, like, a piece of advice that you'd give to someone who wanted to start a book blog?
I think my piece of advice for them would be to, like, first just do it for themselves. Just spend some time reading books, writing reviews, and then if you feel like putting it out there and sharing it with more people, then go start a book blog.
Yeah. And then the second part to that question is, what would your advice be to authors who wish to engage with book bloggers, or not sure where to start in terms of they've written the manuscript but they don't know what to do next?
Well, the manuscript part is hard. Please do not send that to a book blogger. I've gotten those.
Oh, wow.
And there's not much we can do with those. We already have a lot of published books to read.
Yeah.
But no, like, talk to your author friends, engage on Facebook. There are Discord, Facebook communities. I know a few. Like, reach out, talk to people. People who are in the middle of writing books, querying, editing, they will have much better advice than I can ever offer to authors who are looking to get published. As for those who are published, there are lots of websites. Like, I think there's one called Readsy. There's a book blogger list. There's also Book Sirens. There's lots of websites that give you access to active book bloggers. It is a time-consuming process. You have to go to their website, like the book blogger's website. Please read their website. Check out their style of reviews. See if it works for you, and then properly read through their policies and then contact them. Yeah. Don't expect an answer back, because there's lots of people out there reaching out to us. But if you do get an answer back, and if there's a chance for collaboration, do collaborate. Personally, for me, I love working with people. It's really nice to work with people like over and over again. Like you and I, when we first connected, I think it was sometime last year, we did a book excerpt and interview about your poetry book, and we've engaged on Instagram together. We're doing this podcast, and I hope that we continue this relationship. Like, I want to keep knowing about your books and what you're doing, and I hope the same for like all the authors that I interact with, that even if I don't get around to reading their book, I hope that we still continue to stay in touch, because like there was something interesting about them that we did make that connection.
Yes.
Beyond them filling out my form.
It's not just about the form, people.
No, it's about the person on the other side. Because ultimately we're all just people. Yeah, we don't meet in person most of the time, and especially with so many of us being in so many different countries, but it's still possible to stay in touch. And like I'm happy for all the people who are writing these amazing books and putting their work out there, because that's hard. It takes a lot of courage.
Oh, another thing which I must ask you is,
Okay.
how do you feel about ebooks and audiobooks?
I really enjoy them. I sometimes find that it's interesting how I can do ebooks, and even though like I don't know, it's just interesting. Sometimes I can read ebooks faster than I can read hardcover books or paperback books. Audiobooks I think are so much fun. You can do them you listen to them while you're doing laundry or cooking food or
Yeah.
anything. And but I do find I need to be in the mood for an audiobook often, that I'm willing to listen in and just
It's not like
zone out.
background music, is it? It's like you're doing something and you're,
So
oh my goodness, this happened, or like I'm
yeah.
trying to find the audiobook for me. And I think the one I picked and I'm thinking of listening to is probably a bit too heavy. I think I need to start with like a fantasy one or like a thriller story. The one I was thinking of
Okay.
was like Cast, which is like race theory, which might be a bit much. Might be
I was reading a nonfiction book. It was a really short book. It was like a 3-hour audiobook. It's called How to Keep House While Drowning. So it's mostly about house chores and how just looking at them a different way and kind of disengaging from the kind of expectations we think we should have around house cleanup and things like that. It was really good, but I kept wanting to pause it and rewind it so that I could take notes because I can't take notes that fast.
You know, my friend was telling me about a reading app because I'm actually a really slow reader, which is ironic, but yes, I'm a very slow reader. Friends have commented, and they were telling me about this app where it trains you to read faster, and it basically gets a book and it does it word by word. And once
Okay.
it was very interesting. It's something I'm going to look into.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear your experience.
Yeah, but I think it's something that only really works with digital, and that's why when things are in ebook format, it gives you more opportunities. Like me personally, I love a print book, and I'm always going to be a print book person, but I do appreciate the problem in terms of sustainability with print books.
Well, and I find that there are some books that I somehow have in multiple formats, and it makes it so much easier to, read them in whatever format I want.
Yeah.
Like I'll sometimes get an audiobook because I can't seem to get started on my physical book. So I'll start my audiobook, follow along in my physical book. At some point, forget about the audiobook and just keep reading in my physical book. Or if I have an ebook and I'm going out somewhere, then I can just read it on my phone. So there's lots of options there, and depending on what we're doing, where we are, it's so much easier to like kind of read on your phone rather than take out a book and read in front of people because they know you're definitely disengaging from the conversation.
Oh yeah, can you imagine? You have this conversation, you're just like, like, are you there? You listening?
But it's okay to be on your phone though.
No, 100%. Especially when when you're having a way, it's like a group of you, and when people just split off into conversations. It's okay for me to disengage because I'm not needed in this situation. Right? Like, no one's.
But you cannot pull out a book.
No, that's understandable, isn't it? Yeah. But you could definitely pull out the phone. People will accept that. So that's a very good point about you. It's all quite that handy. Okay, so we're gonna do the quick fire round. So this is a pick the best of two options.
Okay.
So I'm gonna keep it simple. Poutine or beaver tail?
Poutine.
Okay. Whistler or I don't even know if you're a snowboarder or a skier. I've just thrown that one at you.
No, but I know Whistler, so I'm like waiting for the next option to see if that is the Whistler I'm thinking of.
No, so it's gonna be Whistler or beach in Vancouver.
I'm gonna say Whistler.
Really? Okay.
I have not been to Vancouver yet.
Fair enough. What's another one? Oh, okay. I think I know the answer to this one. Historical fiction or thriller for books?
Historical fiction. You know the answer to this one.
I knew it, but I was like, gotta ask it. I don't know if you know this one. Amazing Race, The Amazing Race, the TV show, or The Apprentice.
I had The Amazing Race because I do not know The Apprentice.
You know what? You didn't miss out. I was a massively amazing Race. I was like, what is this amazing show? This is brilliant.
Yeah, I did watch a lot of it.
So good. Okay. The View or The Daily Show?
Rare. I don't watch either of those.
Oh, that's interesting. And this one is just it's just going to be a question. In terms of like newspapers or their digital content, what would you say was like the one you rate the most or your favorite one?
I'm terrible about following up on anything.
Do you have one that you read regularly though?
Not really.
That's the answer. And that's the quick fire round.
All right.
It's nice and simple. It's not too crazy. Okay. I do have a lot more questions for you, but I appreciate time is of the essence. So
Okay. We can do this again whenever you want.
oh, that's so good to hear. Yes. Round. I love it. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming on, for being the first guest of this year. It's really been a pleasure to work with you. I feel like I've learned a lot, not just about publishing, but just about balance as well. Yeah, just following you, reading the blog, seeing the reviews, and also like I love the fact that you've introduced me to things like Indie Story Geek and like other authors. I love that. So I cannot recommend the blog highly enough. The newsletter is amazing as well. I will put all the links and stuff down in, I was going to say the chat, not in the chat, in the description. That's what we use. And as always, video will go up on YouTube. Audio will be available most places. I say it like I don't know where they are. It's Spotify, Amazon Music. I think we're on Apple and Google podcasts. So if you prefer audio, please check us out. Again, thank you so much, Kriti. Yeah, have a great day.
Thanks so much for having me.